Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching GEEKCASTER. GEEKCASTER, everything you geek over, sci-fi, fantasy, and culture that you geek over. I'm Seven. Today we have Dana, we have Maliha, we have Rue, and we have Dayveonne. And we're going to switch it up today. We're going to talk about something a little serious, some culture stuff here. We're going to talk about feminism. So, Maliha, I will let you start the vibe on this whole thing, but I'm going to challenge you to start out with the definition of feminism. And let's go from there. Let's go. Let's do it.
Thank you. Hi. Definition of feminism, I think at its root is just equal rights, right? Like equal rights across the gender. There were different waves of feminism. So sometimes even feminists will challenge different ideas of feminisms, different movements. Mm-hmm. And when you go into the discourse, there's also different communities, right? Like we also have critiques of white feminism, certain issues that may prioritize women's issues, but in a way for one women group to still harm another women group, right? So there's a lot of discourse. But the general umbrella of feminism is the discourse of predominantly women's issues. But we also have intersectional feminism, which challenges that, including queer theory, right? Including how feminism is a men's issue. And so, yeah, that's a little 101.
So let's start out with the controversy then. And you might not believe this, but how is it possible feminism being a male's issue? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes down to feminism as a response to the patriarchy, right? Have folks here watched Barbie? Can I use Barbie references?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't see the whole thing, but
Okay. So I think like if we understand how feminism was born out of the patriarchy, like the patriarchy exists, which is a system that men are the dominant gender, right? Like, so the systems support men's issues in a way that oppresses women, right? So how is it a men's issue, and why should men care? I think like basic human rights, like we care for each human being because we're all human. But two, in many ways, the way the patriarchy exists to keep allowing men to oppress women, it also harms men because there are ways that men have to harm themselves, right? Like if the idea is feminine things are bad and feminine things are looked over, men are not allowed to be emotional, for example, because emotional is seen as a women's issue. Even when it comes to like mental health issues, right? We see this a lot because while rates of depression, I don't think discriminate between gender, like there's a lot more women going to therapy. So then it becomes a women's thing, and like not as many men want to engage in, mental health conversation. And then, I mean, it's going to get deep, but like even like things of like rates of suicide and things like that, right? But that's an example of how, because emotions are seen as a women's thing, and men from the who want to uplift patriarchy don't want to engage in that behavior, they're also harming themselves, right?
Rue?
Right?
I see you blinking a lot, Rue. What do you have to say to that?
I agree with everything Maliha said, but I think men don't realize that since they benefit from the patriarchy and they think they're benefiting from toxic masculinity, they think that feminism will result in treating or subjugating men the way women have been subjugated. So I think men understand that men and women are not treated equally, and that for us to course correct, that means men are going to be at a disadvantage, which is, I don't think, the underlying cause, or not underlying theme of feminism, although there are, like Maliha said, different factions where some feminists are like, no, like death to all men, and like, men are terrible and we don't need men in society anymore. But But if men, and many men intrinsically understand that they benefit, even though they say they're feminists and they want everyone to be treated equally, if you ask them, would you rather be a woman? Would you like to live life as a woman? And I'm, sidestepping the trans issue because I can't speak to that, but they would say no. They would say no because they know the power that they have as men. So it is a man's issue because men are the ones as a monolith subjugating women. So it is very much a men's issue more so than a woman's issue because women didn't decide to be subjugated in society, right? Men did. So I think feminism is like 300% men's issue.
Interesting. Dana or Dayveonne, want to jump in there?
Sure. I feel like, Rue, just like the question of like asking men, like, would you want to trade places with a woman? And then being like, no, absolutely not. I think it also just kind of shows that they do have some level of the subjugation of women in our country and across the world because, obviously it is a world thing in many cultures, but mainly here in the United States, obviously. But I just don't even know to the extent that they understand just how much the patriarchy affects women's lives daily. Just thinking from my own personal experience, it's like me walking home at night. I walk like if I'm walking home by myself, like from the train, I'm walking like a crazy person, because I don't want to get raped. And that is something that women have to deal with and think about all of the time consistently. But men, I don't know if they necessarily realize that. And so it's like me sometimes explaining that to some of my friends in a very funny way, because I just deter to humor. But I don't know if they necessarily understand certain things. And I feel like because of the patriarchy, it's not even necessarily that sometimes some men don't understand it. I feel like sometimes they just don't even believe it, and I think that's a even bigger issue, that there are things that we have to deal with and contend with, but sometimes we're not necessarily being heard. And I feel like this is, a very big time in our country nowadays, because we do have way more women in more powerful positions, and we are, being able to share our truth and say certain things. But I feel like the last few years, there's been such a pushback. And you have now even women, pushing back with the men, like especially after the Barbie movie came out, looking at some of the news stories and what people were saying, and they're like, I can't believe that they would want little girls to think this way. And it's it's a movie, it's not necessarily even for little girls. But it's interesting just to see the pendulum swinging, right now when it comes to the discussion around feminism. So I don't know. It's a bigger topic than I think I thought when I first came into this conversation. And I'm actually kind of surprised that I have a lot of thoughts around it too, which is good. So yeah.
I also think, especially when you were mentioning about walking home at night and feeling unsafe, I don't think it's that, obviously women have much higher rates of experiencing violence, but men also experience violence, right? They could also be on the street and somebody attacks them. And I think one thing people forget, even when the victims are men, the perpetuators are also often men, right? Because one of the things, and this is going to be a little heavy, if you think of CSA, children experiencing SA, young men also experience it at alarming rate, but it doesn't often get space because people have framed feminism as the issue of just women, but it includes young men or men in general who are also victims of the patriarchy, right? And I also say and sometimes I get pushed back on that because even the language of violence against women, it's very passive, violence against women, but where's the violence coming from, right? And that toxic masculinity piece, Oh no, did we lose somebody? No, okay.
No.
Like the toxic masculinity piece is that the perpetuators of violence are also harming themselves. They're also harming community members. That men are hurting men as well, right? In that pursuit of power, right? Like the patriarchy boils down to a structure that's supposed to have masculinity is over femininity, right? Like to keep that order. So yeah, that's something I wanted to add when you were talking about like the feeling dangerous while walking, because it is absolutely true for women, but I think it's also true for men, and I don't think men often think about that. Yeah.
Well, one thing I have to say, I was maybe, I don't know how many years ago. It was a few years ago, but I was immersed in some conversations, and I had no weapon. Oh, I had no clue. So, like I think you made a statement of men just not knowing. And yeah, there's that unless you have a sister or I guess a close female friend that would express
Daughter.
or
Men
daughter,
think
right?
about this when they have daughters more
Probably.
than sisters or wives. Yeah.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
So there's a lot
Yeah.
when it comes to that. There's just you know, looking from, and also I think a lot of it's like the source, right? So if your heart and your intent is good, and fair, you're not thinking of, oh well, when I see someone, I thought she was pretty, so I'm gonna go talk to her, and she's like, ah, well,
Yeah.
It's like, and that's the thing that, because I think a lot of the pushback from, let's say, I don't want to just, it's hard to like a monolith, as you said, like here's the good men and here's the bad men, like there's no gray in between, because there's a lot of gray in between, and that's where things get muddy, the not understanding whether it's culture or environment or someone's past. But there's a certain amount of education that I think all men do need, but also I think there's some education that women need as well, because you guys also add to a lot of the drama. And I mean this because some of that pushback from, let's say, the good guys is when it comes to dating and relationships, kind of like the best way to say it, like, I'm not looking like the peace saver, I'm just trying to express, like, when it comes to dating and interacting, I think a lot of men that at least think they're doing the right thing or might not be educated, right, of just the best ways to handle things, are like, well, I mean no harm to you, so why am I getting all this negative energy? And then women, like, be careful of the words you choose. So for instance, I don't believe in masculine, what does he call it? Masculine toxicity or toxic masculinity?
Toxic
Because
masculinity.
women can be toxic too. There's toxic behavior, and then there's non-toxic behavior. Because again, you're punishing a lot of good men or men that want to be better. Does that make sense?
I think you brought up like 10 different things that I want to
Yeah.
hit on. I'll hit on
Please
like
do.
two. One, like the good guys, I think, or like nice guys. This is like a huge bracket of men who think that they're doing no harm, right? They're like, I'm not hurting anybody. I'm good. I don't, and they think that they're neutral. But we know the neutral people, the both sides people, are actually perpetuating harm because they're not actively correcting their male peers who are harming women or harming other men, right? And every guy knows a guy who's like really disgusting when it comes to women and they're predatory, and they don't speak up. The nice guys don't speak up. So you're not a nice guy if this person is in your company and you also didn't take steps to like, listen, like this is like not okay. So good guys, I don't even know that I would say like they're positive. I would think they're either like they're a little negative in my opinion. And again, I'm speaking generally, right? Generally speaking, I'm not specifically saying you are a nice
100%.
guy, And then the issue with dating, like, I think that's like a whole
It's a
other
whole nother
topic, and
thing,
how like
but it does bleed.
feminism comes into it, but it does bleed into it, yeah. But going back to the whole like equal rights, equal standing in society, like Dana mentioned, like, when I'm walking home at night, it's not even walking home at night. When I get up in the morning, what I wear, like how many rape mitigation techniques or assault mitigation techniques a woman goes through when she gets dressed, in terms of the shoes she wears, which subway she's going to take, the plans that she makes throughout the day and her life, it's integrated into our lives and into our psyche. And we don't even realize we're doing it in a way that men just don't get it. And like, even if it's daylight and it's a deserted street or whatever, and there's a guy walking behind me, immediately I get so irritated. I'm like, why is he walking behind me? Because I don't know what he's going to do. I start walking in the middle of the street, or I stop and I wait for him to pass me before I continue. And this guy did nothing wrong. He's just walking in the street and he happened to appear on the street behind me. You know what I mean? And it's just the constant like threat to exist as a woman that really, I think, drives feminism, which I think men of good, bad, nice, whatever, I don't think any of those men get. So, but I'm not gonna touch the dating part because it does bleed into it, but that's like a huge whole other thing. But just sticking to feminism as a base and good guys, it's more complicated, I think.
It was like literally 2 months ago. I had a conversation, someone from school, from college, and there was a mutual friend at the time, and the person's very, very toxic, very, very toxic. But she said, when she got him alone, they had decent conversations. And I was really surprised that she, especially as an adult, like I thought it was some like middle school stuff where he basically expressed, well, I have to act this way. I have to act like an idiot. Otherwise, my friends will shun me or think I'm soft. This is probably more the norm than, and I'm shocked just because, well, one, I'm not close to that person, number one, but two, if I was, I would have the opportunity to say, hey, what are you doing? But I think that like these little cliques of ignorance and people surround themselves with that and then help perpetuate that. So again, I don't want to put it into the good guys, bad guys, but sometimes the good guys don't have the opportunity to be like, hey, what are you doing? What are you, an idiot? Like, this is not how to be. But I do feel it is, men have to stick up. I don't think it's anything that honestly women can really do. Besides the fact of the dating thing, that you guys need not to date people and that act this way, because that perpetuates a whole nother, because they think they're winning by being a jerk, and this is why they get you. That's a whole nother thing. But I do agree with you that like, it almost comes like, and I don't want to say it's equal, but it comes like the racist thing is like, all right, well, this country was made for this group of people and da-da-da-da. Well, you got to talk to your friends. You got to, I'm not racist towards me. You need to fix that. That's on you. So I almost feel it's the same conversation here where men have to get it together.
Right.
But again, the only way we can get it together correctly is that there's a certain amount of communication, hand-holding, and sharing that we need to get. Because if we don't get it, like, does that make sense? Yes, no, maybe so. Uh-oh, Dana.
Go for it, Dayveonne. He's like waiting. He's like, I just want to say something.
Go ahead, David.
God! Like, from my experience, I can only say that dealing with women, it has been negative majority of my life. I have been accused of being a certain way, but it's a lack of communication. So to me, it's like, if you would have said that, or I would have told you in a polite and respectable way, and I'm only speaking for myself. But then I have moments where I get attacked, verbally accused of certain things. And then it just makes me want to just be like, look, I might as well just stay all to myself, because as a man, I feel like I'm being attacked and I'm never going to win. I'm not saying all women, it's just a certain group of women. And what they assume may not be correct. Like the whole walking at night or walking during the day, I could just be tuned out because I mostly have my head buzz on, zoned out, focusing, trying to get to where I got to get to. While another woman just assumed that, oh, I'm following her, not realizing what's in my mind, trying to get to work or trying to get to a location that I'm trying to get to, because I'm not really focused on her. I'm focused on my location. But I always get that because it's just assumption and assuming. Not saying you're not valid for what you feel. It's just the fact that, for a guy's perspective, I'm not saying all guys, from my perspective as a guy, because I get ridiculed a lot. And 9 times out of 10, it may not be what it is. And it's just to the point where I'll just stay alone by myself, focus on me, enjoy life all by myself.
All right, so where do we go from there, from what Dayveonne is saying, from your perspective? Because hopefully there's some sort of bridge of like, well, where do we pick, as a generation, as a culture, where do we pick up to better understand each other and like some sort of starting point?
I think honestly, starts in places. Sorry, I was gonna say, like, I think it starts in places like these, like just literally having conversations and allowing people to say and share their own personal experiences, but also other things that are like based in truth, and like I feel bad, like when I had to hear, like people that I'm meeting, they feel bad because like they're walking down the street, but I know for me, this is a defense mechanism that I have to do because it only takes that one time for me to be harmed. It's only going to take that one time. So it's like I let my guard down once and then boom, not to say that it's going to happen, but it's happened, and it's happened timeless, happens time and time again, unfortunately. And so it stinks that, you might be perceived to be a threat or a danger when you're really not, but this is something, unfortunately, until things are fixed at a societal level, until people really decide to have these conversations, and I think like hopefully the right voices to be elevated, because it makes me kind of think of like the rise of the incel, especially with what's his face? I can't even think of his name.
Tate.
The dude, the dude.
Tate.
Tate, and and then him infiltrating not only into just men in general online, but him entering into younger spaces. Like I'm hearing about high school and middle school students, lifting his voices up and feeling that he's like such a great person when he spews filth 90% of the time. There might be some things that maybe some people think that he might say that's not terrible, but the fact that this person has been able to rise up and use his platform to say certain things that do attack women, it is a little bit unnerving. But I think, like, to go back to my original question, hopefully, like, we can have conversations like this more, and we can at least it's a starting point.
Right.
We only have like 4 minutes left. So if Maliha and Ruth, you could make a
I could go real quick. I think one thing I wanted to clarify for the sake of the discussion is understanding feminism as a system, right? Like dealing with the systemic stuff, and then there's the interpersonal, right? And I think it's important to separate, because a lot of time women are talking about the systems issue, versus sometimes people might counter it with like, well, my personal experience, right? But it's like you can have interpersonal issues, like when it comes to relationships, for example, that is an interpersonal thing. When we are seeking to connect with individuals, and that's why it's important to distinguish the conversations. And second, to respond to Dayveonne, it's what I think about in that situation, right? Like, it's true. It's, you don't deserve to have people assume the worst of you. That is not fair. With that being said, I hope like you also understand that it's not that the women is afraid of you. The women is afraid of the experience that women go through. Like, we don't, and so do you see, because other men have harmed women, now the woman is scared of you. So I hope that you, like, if you notice how like the reality is that other men have made it dangerous for you. Other men are the reason women are assuming things about you, right? And it goes back to like, connected to what Dana said also. It's like, if somebody gave you a basket of apples, and I gave you that basket of apples, but I poisoned one of them, and now I tell you to eat. Like, imagine that experience, right? Because as a stranger, I don't know who you are. Obviously, if I'm connected to you, that's different. So that was my final piece, and I'll hand it to Rue.
I like the apple thing. Go ahead, Rue.
Yeah, I like it. That was good.
Yeah, no, I appreciate both of your remarks, everyone's remarks, really. But that's what I was gonna say, that we can't tell who is genuinely a good person versus the person who intends harm, because you know what? Everybody looks like a person. You know, the villain doesn't have like a name tag. Hi, I'm gonna hurt you. So I think that's just from an empathetic perspective, and I really appreciate the vocabulary Maliha introduced in terms of like systemic versus like interpersonal or personal experiences. The other thing I would encourage, like men in general, women are very generally, we're speaking in generalizations, are very empathetic, and we're always thinking about other people's perspectives in addition to our own. And men are not socialized to do that. Men are generally thinking about their own perspective. But I think it would improve interpersonal relationships as well as general, like how you live your life kind of situation, if you do think about someone else's perspective and then adjust just a little bit, thinking about, oh, this person's over here, let me not eat the entire cake, let me leave some slices behind for someone else in the room. So just to think about it from that perspective, and I think that could lead to more understanding and empathy between people of different backgrounds and experiences.
We have exactly 2 minutes and a half. I want to say thank you, everyone, for starting this conversation. And it was very interesting. I made sure I didn't lead which aspects that we would go in this conversation, because talking about street harassment, talking about interpersonal relationships, and then, but we didn't really get into the economic, social and political aspects. So I purposely didn't label anything because I was really curious, and it's just interesting where we naturally went with this. Also, just as a society, I would love to, in the future, if you guys are available, ask the question, and I'll give you time, obviously, to think about it. You have a whole week. Do we even care about women in this society? And this is coming from everybody, from male, female, just because sex trafficking, slavery is very alive today, very alive, but no one seems to talk about it. Not no one, but very few people. So, but anyway, a lot of food for thought. Dayveonne, I know you have another show, but thank you so much for staying and being a part of this. Rue, Maliha, Dana, and this is GEEKCASTER, going a little bit on the politics episode of something deeper, something for everyone to think about, and hopefully this sparks more conversation, and through that conversation, hopefully we'll have a path of healing. Thank you very much for everyone being a part of this conversation, and we'll see you next time.